All right, so let's talk about the urinary system. The function of the urinary system is to eliminate waste, regulate blood volume, help regulate blood pressure, also help with blood pH, electrolyte balance, and also to produce and excrete urine. So it's a very important component of homeostasis and achieving homeostasis. All right, so this is just a reminder here for you to be sure to always look at your list of structures to know, because there may be some things I don't hit on during these lectures or that you may not label, and there are a few things that you don't get labeled. So surely by now at this point in the semester, you're aware of that. But just a reminder, look at your list of structures to know. All right, so the kidneys are bilateral paired organs, and these guys are retroperitoneally, retro meaning behind, peritoneum, placed along the peritoneum, placed in the upper left and right abdominal quadrants. All right, they are bean shaped, and this is where we get the name for kidney beans. The function is to eliminate excess bodily fluid, salts, other byproducts from metabolism, help regulate the acid-base balance, blood pressure, and of course other homeostatic processes. Remember, they are bilateral, so we have a left and a right. So which one is this? Is this the left kidney or the right kidney? Okay, I gave you a second to answer there. This is the left kidney, and you will notice it is a little bit higher because it's got to kind of get a little higher than some of those other organs in there. All right, so here we have the cortex. The renal cortex is the outer part of the kidney, and so you can kind of see this outlined pretty well here. Okay, outer portion of the kidney. So this is all cortex except for that outer layer we'll get to in a moment. It contains the glomerulus, the convoluted tubules. The renal cortex is surrounded on its outer edge by that renal capsule. Okay, so this brown skin-lookish layer is the renal capsule, and it's a layer of fatty tissue as well. And so together, the renal cortex and the capsule house and protect the inner structures of the kidneys. All right, so here we have the medulla, the innermost part of the kidney, and you can see that highlighted here. I really like the APR images here because it makes it very definite for you to see which portions are which. So you'll notice I use more APR pictures alongside the models in these particular lectures. So it is arranged in these pyramid-like structures, all right? And you know, roughly pyramid-like, all right? This forms the bulk of the nephron structure, and this is where the primary function of the organ actually occurs. So this is where the filtering of waste materials and elimination of bodily fluids, this is where the business is done, so to speak. So next we have the renal sinus, which of course you know a sinus, or you should know, is what? What is the sinus? We have sinuses in our head, right? That's a region of space, okay? And so this is a cavity within the kidney, which is occupied by the renal pelvis, the major and minor calyces, blood vessels, which you can see here, some nerves, and even some fat. So if I ask you this on the exam, I will ask you, what is this cavity or space? And so you'll be able to distinguish between, do I want this cavity or the renal sinus, or do I want the renal pelvis? All right. So you can see that real well over there in green as well, but you got to remember this is a space. This is just the space. All right, so next we have the minor calyces or calyx, all right? And so we have minor and major, and again, that's just describing location, 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 or size, all right? And so these are going to be the smaller portions here, all right? So we're going to have major calyces here, and really I probably should move that slide forward. And then the smaller branches or forked areas, those are going to be the minor calyces for plural. This surrounds the renal papillae of each pyramid and collects urine from that pyramid. And so there are several minor calyces. You can see those converge here to form a major calyx. All right, and so now we have the major calyx, all right, and so this is just the larger area before it forks or divides off. They can be described somewhat as cup-shaped, and they're in the renal pelvis, and they surround the renal papillae. All right, so in here we have renal pyramids. In each medulla, we have smaller units that are the renal pyramids. These look like triangles lined up next to each other, or they look kind of like little cones to me. Actually, they look like cones that we see. We have rods and cones and eyes, and they're kind of similar to that. Their function is to transport urine from the outer part of the kidney, where it is produced, into the calyces where urine collects before it is passed through the ureter to the bladder. And we kind of already mentioned it, but we have the capsule, and that's a tough fibrous outer layer. Looks kind of like this, like a skin, I said, and that's what surrounds the entire kidney. All right, so here we have the ureters, and these are bilateral tubes made of smooth muscle, and they basically just propel urine from the kidneys to the bladder. All right, next we have the urinary bladder, and this is a muscular sac situated just above and behind the pubic bone. And of course, its function is, you could probably guess, is to store urine. So this trigone area of the bladder, the urinary trigone, this is a triangular shape, and I like it because it's easy to identify, a smooth triangular region that is very sensitive to expansion. And so when it is stretched, this is where the receptors are that signal the brain that it needs to empty. All right, so here we have the fundus of the bladder. Remember, the fundus is always the portion that is above the opening. So just look above the trigone there. Now, don't mistake me, the trigone is not the opening, but you can see it there. All right, so now we have the urethra. This is the tube or duct which connects the urinary bladder to the urinary meatus for removal of urine from the body. And this is actually much shorter in women than in men. All right, so here is your really important functional unit of the kidney, the nephron, and then we're going to look at all the parts of those, the ascending limb and descending limb, and hopefully we've already done lectures so you kind of understand the importance of things like the vasa recta and the countercurrent exchange multiplier. And this is really important to understanding the functioning of the kidney. You know, and I'm sitting here thinking perhaps it is actually better to watch this video before the lecture, but you may want to go back and forth between the two. It may help you to understand things better. All right, and so the nephron, this is the functional unit of the kidney. This is composed of things like a renal corpuscle and a complex system of tubules. They connect to a collecting duct. This is going to regulate water and soluble substances in the blood via filtration, some active transport, reabsorption, and excretion, and this is vital for homeostasis. All right, so here we have the loop of Henle. This is a very important structure, but before we move on, I want to kind of explain to you what you're seeing in this model, because I remember as a student thinking that this whole unit here was the nephron, okay? And this is actually two nephrons, so don't confuse that. This is a single nephron unit, and all of this is a single nephron unit with your glomeruli and all, okay? Also, I'm going to go ahead and point out, this is the vasa recta over here, and it really goes around this loop of Henle. And I think at the very end of the lecture, somewhere down there, I have a slide that is a much better representation of what that should look like. Models have limits. They do the best they can in order to show us things with our little 3D structures here. But the human body is complex, and so sometimes they have to do what they can to simplify things. I'm not sure it was really necessary to move that over to the side, but apparently they, for some reason, thought it might be easier for you to learn with it moved off like that, okay? So the loop of Henle is part of the kidney tubule, which forms a long loop in the medulla of the kidney. All right, so this is the part of the nephron that is down in the medulla, and you can see here, we've got, let me make sure I've got this on here. This is our division here. So we have the medulla here, so half of the nephron is there, and the other half is the cortex, all right? And so this forms that long loop in the medulla of the kidney, and that is from which water and salts are going to be reabsorbed into the blood. So we have a convoluted and a distal tubule. And the word convoluted, if you're not familiar with it, is kind of disorganized, going all different directions. And so somebody might use that in a different context and say that someone's lecture was very convoluted. And that would kind of mean like they've gone off in all these different directions and rabbit trails, okay? And so hopefully, that might have been one, hopefully that you're not finding that these lectures are very convoluted. But the tubule is. And so proximal, of course, means nearest, distal further away. So distal is going to be closest to the collecting duct. All right, and so this structure here is the collecting duct, and so we've got a distal convoluted tubule, and here is our proximal convoluted tubule. It is going to be nearest the glomerulus. All right, and so you can take your pin and let's do it this way, and you can point it on there and just trace it. Follow it down to the loop of Henle. So you'll have glomeruli, proximal convoluted tubule. Are you still seeing that? I don't think you are. All right, glomeruli, proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, and then collecting duct. So that's how you, because these do change orientation, you will notice that different models, they'll have them flipped. So be careful and make sure you pay attention to that. Distal is closest to the collecting duct. Proximal is going to be closest to the glomerulus. This is responsible for the most or the largest amount of reabsorption of filtrated substances like sodium and glucose and amino acids. It reabsorbs about 67% of each filtered substance. So very important. Little guy, big job. So here's the distal convoluted tubule. The numbers are not quite in order, but this needed to be next to proximal convoluted tubule, and I didn't want to remake all of the worksheets. And you're going to label this right next to it anyway. It doesn't really matter what the number says. So as I was saying, remember you can trace. For here, you could go from collecting duct. So duct distal, that's one way you can remember D and D, all right? All right, so probably should have had the other convoluted tubule here. I don't know why this is not going to cooperate. Let me unclick that. There we go. All right, so this is going to be the ascending limb. You have an ascending limb and a descending limb, okay? And so the ascending limb has a longer, thick segment. You can kind of see that right here. That segment is longer and thicker. And we sometimes call this the diluting segment. And this is impermeable to water and permeable to ions, which you might remember from lecture. So ions are going to be reabsorbed from the urine by active transport here. And those are things like sodium, potassium, and chlorine. All right, and so here we have the descending limb. The descending limb, I'm trying to get your word to come up there for you. This one has a low permeability to ions and urea and a high permeability to water. And you can notice, remember this one had the longer, thicker section here. The thicker section here is a little bit shorter on the descending limb. And this is what it encompasses, okay? So each one of those white dots has these structures on the inside. And so the whole structure then is called the renal corpuscle. And then this outer layer here surrounding it, okay, this is almost kind of a white opaque looking, that is Bowman's capsule, okay? Sometimes we do refer to the corpuscle altogether as Bowman's capsule, but really the capsule is just the outer covering. And then lastly, inside of it, we have this structure here. This is the glomerulus, all right? These are all very important when we look at the functionality of the kidney and what is going to happen as far as concentrating urine, exchanging waste, and reabsorbing water and that type of thing. So this is a very important. All right, here we have the renal corpuscle, the renal corpuscle, and this is the blood filtering component of the nephron, and it contains the glomerulus. And you can see over here, they're going to have a couple of these open, so we can see Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. But each of one of these white dots is actually a renal corpuscle. So here is the glomerulus. I get a little tongue-tied after a while here, and you can see that you have a bunch or a network of capillaries in here, and these are made of endothelial cells. And this is a really good image of the histology here, and you can really kind of see that, and you can see all of these cells in here. You can see Bowman's capsule. All right, so here we have Bowman's capsule. It's highlighted in blue up here, and it's just the capsule that surrounds the glomerulus. All right, so next we have the afferent and the efferent arterioles here. So this is the afferent arteriole. It is going to bring blood to the glomerulus. Remember, gosh, I'm trying to think if that was in cardiovascular. I think it was actually in the nervous system. It would be really convenient if afferent meant away, but it doesn't. And so that's how I remember what afferent means. I remember it doesn't make any sense. Afferent is bringing to. So this brings blood to the glomerulus. A is first in the alphabet, so this is 2 is coming first, maybe. Whatever works to help you keep them straight. Efferent, you can say exit, so maybe that's how you can keep them straight. So anyway, this brings blood to the glomerulus. This is larger than the efferent arteriole. It's a little bit wider, so it can provide an increased blood pressure in the glomerulus, and this allows ultrafiltration to occur. More blood reaches the efferent arteriole, which is smaller, and so that because that's smaller, we're able to increase the blood pressure in the glomerulus. Well, that's going to therefore increase the hydrostatic pressure, or pressure from the fluid. And so it's going to cause a high hydrostatic pressure, which is going to force small molecules like water and urea, ions, amino acids through the glomerulus into Bowman's capsule and onto the nephron. So structure determines function. You've heard me say that a lot. It's really important. All right, and so here is the efferent arteriole. It's leading away, so it's exiting. So here we have the vasa recta. The vasa recta, sometimes called the peritubular capillary. So peri meaning around, and tubular meaning tube, and of course they're capillaries. And so even the name tells you that it should be around the tube, okay? But this is the way this particular model shows the vasa recta. And then we've already mentioned it, but this is the collecting duct. And you can see they're only showing 2 nephrons, but there are going to be many, many different nephrons along several nephrons that are emptying into a collecting duct, which physically connects the nephrons to the minor calyx. So this is the last part of the nephron. And here is that slide I was telling you about. You can see here the vasa recta here going around the loop of Henle. That's really what it should look like, because these work in conjunction together. Okay, very, very important. This is where we get our countercurrent multiplier here to concentrate urine. So that's important.